Hello and welcome. I'm Tafara Gadamo. Ethiopian Airlines has continued to lead in African aviation. But what is the secret here? Are the challenges African carriers face surmountable? My guest today, the Group CEO of Ethiopian Airlines, Tewolde Gebremariam, says it's time that there is a unified African presence. A very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You call yourself pioneers of aviation technology. What does it exactly mean? Does that include the things that you've done last week, acquiring a new 787-9 Dreamliner aircraft?
Yes, it does, but the history is much longer than that. When we say that we have always been a aviation technology leader in Africa, we meant that this is more than now close to more than 50 years. The airline is in service for the last 72 years. And out of that 72 years, especially when we focus since the 60s, the early 60s, when most of the African countries were taking independence from the former colonizers, and where they were ready, busy in nation building process. And it also coincided with the formation of the Organization of African Unity. Ethiopian Airlines started jet service to the continent. So we introduced the first jet service with the 707. So at that time, it was an eye-opener for most African countries. Number one, they were establishing their first nationhood. Number two, it was very inspiring for them to see jet service connecting the continent. Three, again, it was very inspiring for most African countries to see black pilots in airplanes, flying airplanes, jet service for that matter. So this is in the minds of most Africans today.
New technologies, new aircrafts. As soon as they come out, you want to be the first in the line.
Yeah, so that continued with the 767 in 1984, and then continued with the 757 in 1990s. And then in 2010, we continued with the 777-200LR, which is the longest range commercial airplane in the world. So again, that continued with the 787 Dreamliner when we became the first country in the world next to Japan to take the delivery.
That was 2012.
2012. And then that continued with 2016 when again we became the first airline to introduce the Airbus A350, again modern airplane. First in Africa, and now the 787-900.
Why did you move? You didn't entirely move from Boeing to Airbus, but you diversified your flights. Why was it important? Why was it necessary to do so?
The fleet economics has its own parameters. Early in the beginning, it was not economical for us to diversify because the number of airplanes was very small. So the fleet was small in size. So the rule of thumb in the industry is when your fleet size exceeds 50, each fleet type will justify its own scale, economies of scale. So today, the Boeing airplanes and the Airbus airplanes have their own economies of scale. So when we reached 50 and exceeded 50, it was time for us to diversify because each airplane has its own advantages. In terms of economics.
But you could have as well stayed with Boeing.
Yes, we could, yeah. But we want to take advantage of the new technology from Airbus. We didn't diversify to Airbus just for the sake of diversification, but we diversified to Airbus with the new technology, the A350, which has its own advantages with its own new technological advancement. So in a way, we were taking advantage of the new technological advancement in Boeing with the 787 and with Airbus with the A350. That's why today we are among the very few carriers in the world which is operating both advanced technology airplanes from Boeing and from Airbus.
You mean the best of two worlds?
The best of the two worlds.
And for your local flights, you have what?
The Bombardier.
Bombardier.
Again, that is also a game changer in its own category because it's a turbo propeller airplane, but its speed gets closer to jet. So it is between the jet speed and turbo speed. And also its economics is unbeatable.
No matter how high-end the technology that these new aircrafts have, you will never be able to fly direct to Washington, D.C., for example.
Yes, that is the law of nature. It's unfortunately, we cannot help it, because even the longest range commercial airplane, which is the 777-200LR, which is a very niche market or a very niche product, cannot make it. From Dubai, Emirates is flying the same airplane from Dubai to Los Angeles non-stop, because Dubai is located at sea level. But Addis is located at 2,400 meters above sea level. And, law of physics has it that the higher you go in the altitude, the uplift capacity of airplanes reduces. So on average, we lose like between 10 to 20 tons on every flight because of the altitude.
So, but you have, 100 plus destinations worldwide?
We have, 100 plus destinations worldwide in 5 continents. So the only inhabited continent that we don't fly today is Australasia. So we are in all continents.
So are those destinations making economic sense?
They do,
because sometimes you scrap off your map some of the destinations.
Yeah, it is.
So why did you institute those destinations in the first place?
We don't frequently do that. Yes, in a couple of times we did. But again, we came back, like Singapore, for instance. We introduced it a few years ago. It didn't work. It's not that the market was wrong, but we were not there with the right product. We were flying with an old 767 with a stop in Bangkok. But the competition demanded that we fly non-stop, and also the competition demanded that we fly with the latest airplanes. So today, when we get the 787, we went back to Singapore with non-stop 787, and it's doing well. So, the network, always we measure the network, not individual stations. But fortunately for us, almost every station is economical for us.
You are the leading airlines in Africa. I mean, Kenya Airways is not doing well, as is South African Airways. They're struggling, and so on. What is the secret to your success?
I think I would say many factors, but the main ones could be the corporate governance, meaning we are completely government-owned, fully government-owned, but we are operating as a private company. So the combination is making a very good day-to-day management of the airline. So the second one is leadership. Leadership matters a lot. So we have a very highly committed management team, young in age, but very experienced in the industry. And most of us have grown up in the airline. We're not outsiders. So we know the airline business in thin and thick, and bad and good times. So that also helps a lot. And the other thing is we all consider Ethiopian Airlines as a national mission, not as a company giving us paycheck at the end of the month. So that also makes a lot of difference. This applies not only to the management team, but also to the entire more than 13,000 employees of Ethiopian Airlines. I would not be able to speak about the other airlines, but I would say the operating environment in Africa is extremely hostile.
In what sense you think hostile?
Hostile in a sense that the aviation is not getting the right attention from governments in Africa. Although the fact on the ground is if you want to travel yourself tomorrow to Uganda, I don't think you have any other means of transport except by air. So it is, in that sense, it is an essential public transport.
So governments need to support their own airlines?
Yeah, they have to see it as a strategic interest, as a strategic asset, and as a strategic policy instrument. But unfortunately, that is not the case, both in terms of liberalizing the market so that every airline flies to any point which makes sense for them freely. That is not the case. In Europe, we have that completely liberalized between and among airlines in Europe, but not in Africa. On the other side, the tax is very high. Taxation is very, very insanely high. So that makes cost of operation very high, and that translates to the customer. And aviation is not growing. So lack of growth also reduces volume, and then unit cost again goes up. So it's a vicious circle. On the other hand, infrastructure is also very lacking in terms of airport infrastructure, in terms of regulatory system, in terms of skilled manpower. So these are challenges. And at the end of the day, you see that 80% of the market share between Africa and the rest of the world is controlled by non-African airlines.
So are you suggesting that governments need to take the lead in terms of like owning their own airlines and so on and so forth? You know, private carriers couldn't make sense.
No. It may not necessarily be owning. Owning could be a solution in certain jurisdictions and countries. But whether it is owned by the government or by private or jointly, it has to be seen as a strategic asset by the government, as a long-term business, not like, you start it today and tomorrow if it makes money, fine. If it doesn't make money, you close it. It doesn't work that way. You remember Ghana Airways, Nigeria Airways, Air Afrique, Zambia Airways, they are all dead today.
You said 80% of the market share is owned by what? Non-Africans. So that's a very serious competition coming as African.
It is serious competition. And not only that, we are concerned about the 80% today and only 20% African airlines, but the trend, the 20% market share of African airlines used to be 60% some 20 years ago. It came down, so it's a downward spiral. So who knows? In the coming 10 years, there may not be an African airline at all. Because from 60% now it came to 20%, and it will continue to dive to zero.
So are African carriers taking this seriously? Do you meet every time and again and talk about this? I know that you're in a committee, a member of the...
Yeah, I'm a committee member of AFRA. I'm a committee member of IATA also, board of IATA. But unfortunately, IATA, the board at IATA also is dominated by non-African carriers. So they have the interest to fly more and more to Africa. At the end of the day, we are not trying to protect African airlines or put unnecessary wall or protectionism, but at least it has to be fair, 50-50. So I think African governments, and particularly the African Union, have to wake up and see their fair market share.
Are you making your case out there at the African Union? Are they listening?
We are discussing with the African Union. And we are discussing with AFCAC, African Civil Aviation Commission, which is a specialized agency of the African Union. And because of this, we are trying to make our case heard. We are trying to lobby. And because of this, now we are trying to restart the Yamoussoukro Declaration, which was signed some 20 years ago, but which never took off in terms of implementation. So now, again, more than 20 countries have ratified it, because we want to make sure that it is implemented. So hopefully in the next couple of years, all African countries will...
So who are your serious competitors from outside of Africa? Of course, the airlines from the carriers from the Middle East, right? I'm talking about the Qataris and the Emiratis, and of course...
Etihad and Turkish.
Yeah.
These are very, very strong competitors in Africa. Ethiopian Airlines today is the largest airline in Africa, the largest airline group or aviation group, not only in flying, but also in infrastructure, in academy, in cargo, in MRO, maintenance of airplanes, engines and components. But when you see in terms of competition, Emirates flies 4 flights a day to Johannesburg, 2 flights a day to Cape Town, and 1 flight a day to Durban. So now the question comes, who is the national carrier of South Africa? This is the situation that we are facing today. So, our partners in Africa or our airlines in Africa, they are really suffering because of regulatory system is not supporting them. The infrastructure is not supporting them. Taxation is insane, as I told you. Aviation is taxed more than alcoholic beverage and cigarettes in Africa. And nobody can justify this. But hopefully one day we will realize.
You have 14,000+ employees at the Ethiopian Airlines. But also people are living, understandably living too, right? People that you've trained, pilots and so on, and technicians and so on and so forth. What are you doing within the company to keep them working for you the years ahead?
Yeah, the brain drain was a concern some 7 years ago, but we approached it in two directions. The first, we said, okay, let's build the largest aviation academy in Ethiopia, here in Addis, and let's train as many youngsters in Africa, and particularly in Ethiopia, and as possible. And then those who believe will continue with us will continue. And unfortunately, some will leave, but still will be carrying our objectives and our strategy with what we have. So,
why do people leave?
Very few. This was some 7 years ago, but later on, we have made a lot of adjustments, both in compensation, in working conditions, and also on the other side, we have been training large number of people. You know, the academy can train 4,000 students a year. Right now, we have 1,500, so we still have huge capacity. We are training young boys and girls from Ethiopia, and we are also training from the rest of Africa. So today, except pilots, we are full self-sufficient, and we have excess manpower, excess skilled manpower. So I think we have addressed that issue quite well.
What is happening on that track then, on the pilots track?
The pilots, you know, the profession is very sensitive, so it takes its own time. It takes you a couple of years to train ab initio pilot, meaning the basic. And then it takes you on every airplane, you have to train the pilots again. And it takes about 3 years in every airplane. So by the time the pilot reaches the biggest airplane, which is a 777, is about 10 years. So you cannot drive that process as fast as you want. It has its own limitations. That's why we are still in short of pilots. But when you take the academy, today we have more than 200 pilots training in the academy. So the intake capacity has really grown from about 25 in 2010 to more than 200 today. Pilot training airplanes are more than 24 today, the small airplanes. In fact, the airspace in Addis is so congested that we have expanded to Mekelle, and we are expanding to Asa and to Debre Zeit. And we used to train also in Dredwa. So we are using all available resources.
And how about your hubs in Lome and, of course, in Lilongwe? And are there any other plans to add a few more hubs in the African continent?
This is one of our strategy, as you know, in our Vision 2025. So the multiple hub concept is one of the strategy to withstand the competition coming from the outside of the continent. So by the hubs, the definition is we are getting closer to the customer, getting closer to the market. So Africa is a huge landmass, a huge continent. So it's not possible to serve from Addis. So we decided to expand our hubs. So the Lome hub is doing very well with ASKY, 40% owned by Ethiopian and fully managed by Ethiopian. 8 airplanes in service, and flying to 22 destinations. You know, the average person knows it very well that before ASKY, if you want to travel from Cote d'Ivoire to Benin, you'll have to go to Paris. Yeah. But today, that problem is resolved, so Africans can visit neighbor countries easily and conveniently. The second hub is in Southern Africa. It didn't succeed as much as we expected it. In Malawi, a small economy, and unfortunately the country is struggling with a lot of challenges since we opened the hub. So we have 2 airplanes, Air Malawi, 51% owned by government of Malawi and 49% owned by Ethiopian Airlines. But we are working with Zambia with the same similar arrangement. And geographically, if you see, Lusaka is better placed to serve as a hub in Southern Africa. And of late, we have been requested and invited by the government in Mozambique to establish a domestic carrier there, domestic and international carrier. So Ethiopian Airlines Mozambique will be established in the next couple of months and will be up and running to serve the country domestically and also internationally. The same in DRC. That process has been very slow, painfully slow because of the political situation and the unrest in the country. We have also started negotiation in Chad, which is really progressing very well. And we are also discussing with Cote d'Ivoire. They have a national carrier, Air Ivoire, but we are going to cooperate with ASCAI. And maybe in January we will be flying from Addis via Abidjan to New York. As you know, the African Development Bank returned from Tunisia to Cote d'Ivoire. So they have this need of connectivity, so they want to be connected with, of course, they are connected with Europe through Paris, but they are not connected with the United States, so they have requested us and we are working together. Nigeria is a big market, very challenging though, so we are also discussing with the government.
You're chairman of the board of directors of the Ethiopian Tourism Transformation Agency. And of course, we know that Ethiopian Airlines is one of the major actors in the sector, in the tourism sector. You think it's doing well? I mean, how do you gauge the Ethiopian tourism industry as we speak today? Pretty challenging.
Honestly speaking, it's pretty challenging, but it is doable. We are making progress, slow. If you ask me, am I satisfied personally? Not yet, but we are making progress. But I think tourism is a...
What are the key things that you need to challenge head-on to be able to get there?
Two things. Number one is the destination development or product development, we call it. And I firmly believe that I think as a national resource, we have to focus on product development, because in any marketing, as you know, unless you have a product which is desirable by customers, you cannot market. Nobody will buy your product. So we have to develop global standard services which any tourist from east or west expect in any global standard. So we are yet behind in that area. Our neighbors in Kenya, Tanzania have
totally different story.
Different story. So we have to focus on that. We are doing that. And then maybe some part of our resources we have to deploy on marketing the country as a tourist destination so that we can engage the already existing products. But side by side, we have to make sure that even the existing products like hotels in Lalibela, in Aksum, in Gondar, in Bahar Dar, meeting global standards in terms of customer service. We are working on that. We are working also with the regions. The fact that we have a federal administration makes it a little bit challenging, but doable. And the third one is we have to be able to attract foreign direct investment in tourism sector. That has been almost zero.
So you are not only Ethiopian Airlines, you have brought to your fold, if you will, the Ethiopian Airports Enterprise. What's the rationale?
The airport merging with a group is entirely meant to provide global standard services. You know, there were options on the table. There was also option of giving the airport to management contract to foreign airport management companies. But in the end, we discussed and the government decided that if we have a best running airline succeeding in Africa and the global stage covering more than 100 destinations, fully managed by Ethiopians, why not the airport? We can at least transfer the best practices of doing business from the airline to the airport. And that is what is happening right now. It's been 3 months, and customers have been able to recognize the changes, and the progress is really dramatic.
Well, that's about it. Tewolde Gebremariam, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you on my show again. Thank you very much, and good luck. Thank you.
I really thank you for giving us the opportunity. Great.